my computer science major and my business minor, and so they can complement each other really well. So I'm really interested in that intersection, and my goal is to work for a consulting company as a technology consultant. I'm also really interested in working in web development, both front end and back end. So I'm currently really involved in the Society of Women Engineers, and I want to continue working with K through 12 students and just stay really involved. Luckily, there are ways to do that. Like you can still like attend national conferences and get to mentor people, which is really cool. Finally, I really enjoy teaching my class right now, and I'd like to continue that in some sort of capacity as my career continues, either in like a mentorship role, a managerial role, or like a teacher of some sort. Perfect, thank you. So why I chose STEM. When I entered school, I was really interested in pursuing medicine because it's kind of what my high school exposed me to. I never took an engineering course or a computer science course. I had no background in coding at all. So I kind of signed up for the programming course just because I was interested, and I really, really enjoyed it. Everyone was super supportive, and it's just a really nice environment to be in. It really teaches you like problem solve, and it was something I really enjoyed. And it's almost really full circle because I came back teaching the class that drove me to pursue the computer science major. So that's really fun. I love my major and the various opportunities that come with it. So you can work honestly anywhere in any sector because it teaches you how to problem solve and like how to just work anywhere. You can work with tons of different people. So it opened up a lot of opportunities for me, and I just continue to learn, and I love it so much. I also really like just being able to help people, and I want to see a lot more women in STEM. So reach out to me if you guys have any questions or looking to do something with SWE, because it's really nice to just see like people, or women especially, women and girls, get pumped to be like doing STEM stuff. So let me know. So my advice to you, the biggest thing that's helped me is just like being confident in yourself. I know that's a lot easier said than done. I like found myself facing imposter syndrome and like asking myself if I'm really good enough to be where I am. And like you have to tell yourself that you are, just because like sometimes people won't be there to tell you that. So you have to be like your biggest cheerleader. It was especially hard because as my classes got harder and harder and I moved up like in my major, my classes definitely shifted to have like mostly a male presence. And it really intimidated me and like put me off from like putting my best foot forward in like my classes and even like in smaller groups, just because I was like scared to sound like stupid, which you never will. Like you should always ask questions and get help. Like go to office hours, ask in class, because like you just have to do what's best for yourself, and you can't worry about like other people, because as long as you're confident in yourself, that's all that matters. It just oozes out. So like I know every single one of you is really, really smart and really capable of doing what you put your mind to. So definitely be confident in yourselves. I also think it's really important to have a mentor or like a couple mentors, honestly, because they can always be there to give you advice and like help you through the issues that you're facing. So I know like I found definitely a couple through SWE that I know I can reach out to whenever I'm struggling, whether it be like a job search or a class, or I just need advice on honestly anything. And I also find myself being a mentor, and it's really rewarding to like see yourself grow into that position. I also spent a lot of time over the summer reaching out to a lot of managers in different disciplines and departments, just because I wanted to know like how to move up or like how to get to where I wanted to be in the company. And I found that like, especially if you reach out to like other women engineers within your company, they're like really, really willing to help you because they want to see you succeed. So just like reach out. It's kind of scary sending like a first email, but even if you just get like coffee with someone or have a lunch, they can provide a lot of information, like a lot of advice in general. So an example would be this summer, my team was all males. I was the only girl and I was an intern. So it was really hard for me to just speak up during meetings or like find myself really stuttering over my words. And I kind of felt like I didn't sound, it sounded like I didn't know what I was talking about a lot of the times. So I reached out to my mentor, and she like helped me come up with a game plan about how to speak and like how to ask questions and how to make sure that I was getting my point across. And she was just really helpful, and she actually helped me get the position that I'll be working in next summer too. So they're just really good people to have, like, to help you and have your back. So definitely look out for a mentor. It can be anyone, honestly. It doesn't have to be someone in your discipline. Finally, I think it's really important for you guys to find a place where you belong and you can be yourself. So like my freshman year, first semester, none of my friends are computer science majors at the time. So it was really hard for me to like find people to work with or ask questions to. So I found myself like sitting in the last SWE meeting of first semester, and I met so many cool girls. And they provide you with the opportunity to go to like national conferences and local conferences and really just meet people who want to help you. So just finding a community like that can be like through a club or through an activity that you really like. They really helped me like have fun and relax, but also like push me to do my best. They definitely inspired me to want to go into like being an IA and being like becoming that kind of mentor for other people. So yeah, just make sure that you know like you're capable of everything, and you find your community. Yeah, so that's kind of all I have for today. If anyone has any questions, just reach out to me. That's my email. I'm usually pretty good about responding to things, but if I don't take that personally, just email me again, because sometimes things get lost in my inbox. But yeah, I'm definitely open to questions if anyone has anything.
All right, thank you so much. I think we're going to be having our Q&A at the end of the session. So if all the other panelists would be able to share their slides with me, I could screen share it.
So did you already try clicking on the little shield button at the bottom?
Yeah, I did try that, and I did look into the settings a little bit more, and I'm not sure that panelists can do that. So far, it's only the hosts. So it would just be easier that way.
Okay, yeah, no worries. I'll send that to you now.
All right, thank you.
I actually don't have slides for today, just some notes here to guide me along, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's okay.
Great.
And I will be introducing our next speaker for the night. First of all, thank you so much, Harshini. Our next speaker for the night will be Sarah. In college, Sarah majored in chemistry and environmental studies. While studying chemistry in graduate school at University of Michigan, learning Python was crucial for her research. Inspired by the ability to analyze large amounts of data, she joined a research group in pathology at UMich, where she helps make software for scientists who measure proteins with mass spectrometry. Please welcome Sarah Haynes.
Hi, I'm just trying to find that email address to send my slides to.
I did share with you in the chat.
Let's see. What can you say it out loud and I'll just type it in?
It's Detroit@integrals.org.
Okay, hopefully this works.
And just an announcement to the attendees, don't be afraid to ask the questions in the Q&A right now. We will be answering all of them at the end of the presentation.
All right, well, while we're doing technical stuff, I just want to go ahead and thank Risha and the other organizers so much for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. I know Risha because she was part of our Girls Who Code club, and she is super smart and did an awesome job, and that was a really fun thing that we did. Okay, so I made way too many slides, and I went ahead and put my doctor on there. So, okay. So I think Risha just said this kind of stuff, so it's going to be a little repetitive because I'm going to tell you a little bit too much about myself. But I am currently a postdoctoral research fellow at in the Department of Pathology at the University of Michigan, but I'm also kind of in the bioinformatics department as well. So anyways, next slide, please. I should have taken out all of my animations. You can just whip through the animations on this slide. I think there's like 2 more. Okay, oop, 1 more back. Okay, perfect. So I went to college at the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, and this is kind of confusing because I put this map on here that's actually showing a different location. But anyways, so I went to college at the University of the South, and it is kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's on a mountain, so not like these pictures, but it was a really fun place to go to college. And when I was in high school, I did AP physics and AP chemistry, and I was like, I really want to do physics. I want to do I wanted to study nuclear fusion. That's what I wanted to do. And that was kind of random, but I ended up not studying physics because when I got to college, I was like, oh, chemistry is much more of a central science. And I sort of just felt this pull towards chemistry. And then the other thing that happened was Sewanee is in the middle of nowhere, and it has a really strong environmental studies program. And I started basically learning more about environmental studies. And the more I learned, the more I realized that it's really important to preserve the environment. And I wanted to know more about how to do that and what is the human impact on the environment in all different ways. And also part of that environmental studies degree was or that discipline is learning how it cuts across all these other disciplines like sociology and economics and all this kind of stuff that's also really important. So I think that's why I gravitated towards that as sort of the central science as well as chemistry, which is also central science. So I ended up doing actually a double major, and both of these were lab science majors. So I ended up taking a lot of lab courses and doing a lot of field work, which was super fun. And now I'm getting to the slide. So one program that was really cool that I got to do during a summer was on this Georgia barrier island. So this is St. Catherine's Island that I'm showing here. So I'm showing Detroit and Ann Arbor in the map there. And then down at the bottom with the little red thing on it is St. Catherine's Island. So it's off the coast of Georgia, thank you. And it's got a bunch of salt marsh on that side, and then it's got this eroding beach on the other side. And it was a summer program where we just did tons of biology field work, and it was super fun. And one of the things we did was monitor lemur behavior, because there's some Madagascar ring-tailed lemurs that live there, and you can study their behavior in this isolated way. We also did really basic things like the picture on the right, where we just did vegetation studies. And that's my friend Shannon, totally covered in mud, because we had to wade through the mud to do this vegetation study, because it turns out, this is a fun fact, that salt marsh is the highest, has the most ability to store carbon of any other ecosystem. And you would think, oh, well, a rainforest or something, but actually it's salt marsh. So if we think about trying to have natural solutions to climate change and the preponderance of greenhouse gases, we can think about restoring salt marshes as one of those natural remediation techniques. Okay, next slide, please. So I did a double major in chemistry and then environmental studies. And I think that worked really well for me. And I'm so glad that I did both of them. And I am a little sad I didn't do physics, but you can't do a triple science major. And another thing, so Sewanee is a pretty small school, and they didn't have a ton of, well, there's some lab research going on at the university, but I actually I sort of sought out research opportunities outside of my college. And I ended up working at the Naval Research Lab, and I studied barnacle adhesion. And you might be like, what, why? And the reason that the Navy is so interested in understanding why barnacles stick to things is because we do have a lot of ships moving around in the ocean for long periods of time, and it takes gasoline or fuel to move those ships around. And if you have barnacles and you have the side of the boat is covered in barnacles and it's highly biofouled, then you can actually end up using 30% more fuel than if it's clean on the sides. And that's such a crazy number that the Navy actually puts money into researching how to prevent barnacles from growing on things. And the way that people used to do this was they would, in the harbors, they would just dump this copper-based poison into the water and to kill everything, fish, everything. And so people decided, that's not a good way to deal with this problem. And so we actually want to understand how the barnacles can attach to a surface and figure that out from the molecular level. So that's when I first started doing kind of molecular biology type research. And then once I got to the end of college, I was like, I don't know what it is that I want to do. So I didn't really have a good option. I didn't really feel like applying to jobs. But I did know that I really liked doing research. And so I just like kind of extremely last minute actually applied to graduate school. So if you're in college and you're like, you might want to go to grad school, get started on it a little bit earlier than I did. But that's my piece of advice here. But yeah, so anyway, I went to grad school, and next slide, please. Okay, so when you get when you get to when you go to college, or sorry, when you go to graduate school, usually you get paid to do it if you're doing a basic science like or a hard science like chemistry, physics. There's a lot of other ones like that. But if you go to graduate school to get a PhD in a science, you oftentimes get paid because you will end up teaching undergrads their classes. So you teach college students in like lab classes and all this kind of stuff. So on the left, we've got a picture of a box of synthetic urine that I took a picture of because I thought it was funny. But one of the weird things that I had to do in my PhD was teach students or college students how to measure different compounds in synthetic urine. And fortunately, we did not use real urine, but in a lab class, we use this to teach people how to use these different analytical techniques to actually measure like metabolites of different drugs or foods or whatever. So I'm kind of showing on this slide like that teaching stuff. And then the other thing that we had to do, or the other courses that I taught included organic chemistry, and there's a lot of things that can go really wrong in organic chemistry. So one of the first things that they teach incoming graduate students what to do or how to do is all the safety stuff, including how to put out fires. So this is my friend Allie putting out a fire on one of our training days. So we had to learn how to use fire extinguishers. Okay, next slide, please. So what did I go to graduate school to learn how to do? Well, what did I learn in graduate school, like from a science perspective? I learned about this, how to do, and about this field called proteomics. And I'm sure you all have heard about genomics and how DNA is, central to the world and to human health in particular. But what you might not have heard yet, or probably maybe you already had this in your biology class, but it's like so important, is this central dogma where DNA turns into mRNA, turns into polypeptides or proteins. And when you want to know like what's actually going on in a healthy person versus a sick person, or what kind of drug is going to work for that sick person, if you go a step further, you actually need to know about the proteins that are being made by their body. And so, what was I going to say? Basically, protein's super important. If you had say you had two identical twins, their DNA is like basically the same, but one of them could be sick and one of them is not sick, and you need to know like how exactly they're sick, and you need to answer that question on a molecular level, and that's what proteomics does. So there's genomics and then there's proteomics, which is the study of basically trying to make these massive, like large-scale measurements of proteins in some tissue or some cells that you grow in a dish or something like that. So that's what I learned how to do in grad school, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Next slide, please. So when you actually talk about like, how do you make these measurements? The answer is mass spectrometry. And I'm wondering if y'all have ever heard of this before, if it's something that gets taught in high school. But it's like such a cool technique. And this is just one, this diagram is just like one type of mass spectrometry or mass spectrometer, but there are a lot of different ones, and they all have different like kind of pros and cons and different uses. But all of them can help you measure actual atoms and molecules. And so when you're talking about figuring out what's wrong with somebody in terms of disease, you need to see those molecules and be able to measure them and identify them. And so to do that, you have to give them a charge. So you give them usually a positive charge. And then you can, if they're positively charged, you can move them around with an electric field inside of a vacuum. And that's how you actually make these really tiny measurements. And I'm super happy to answer any questions about that just for later. because I know a lot about mass spectrometry. Okay, next slide, please. So all of the, kind of like I was saying, like, so the genes are already really complicated, right? But when you get up to that protein level from mRNA to protein, there's a lot of stuff that happens. And so even like the total, so there in the human genome, there's about 20,000 different genes. But when you get up to the protein level, there's like hundreds of thousands of different genes because things get spliced in different ways. They get modified by like little chemicals that get attached to the proteins. And so it's super complicated. And when you're trying to make these measurements, you have to basically get things as simplified as possible before you can actually use the mass spectrometer to measure them. So like I said, the mass measurement is happening in a vacuum. But what you can do when you still have a little bit of gas around is do the size-based separation using a thing called ion mobility. So this is kind of a schematic of that. So you can see like the really small yellow proteins in this case, let's say that they're proteins, come out faster than the bigger ones, the red ones at the back. And so this is like another technique that can be used really quickly that works on the same time scale as a mass spectrometer to simplify mixtures and basically make sure that you get a better picture of the proteins that are in a sample or in a patient's tissue or something like that. And I say all this because this is what I worked on in my PhD. I worked on trying to make these ion mobility separations better. So that's kind of an overview of the type of thing I worked on. Next slide, please. Okay, so in my PhD, I worked in a chemical biology lab. So my boss was primarily, or my advisor was primarily concerned with like coming up with more like kind of more on the biological side of things. But what I ended up doing, or my role in the lab, ended up being like the instrument fixing person, the instrument maintaining person. So these are some, so on the left, we've got some pictures of the different parts of the instrument. And like when you take the face off of it, that's that one in the bottom left-hand corner. That's where the ions actually go into the instrument. And then I had to clean ion guides. Like these things have gold plating on them. So it's like bling bling. And I got to clean those and get them so shiny and nice. And then the top stuff is really expensive fittings for handling very tiny amounts of liquid. So I had to learn how to do all that kind of stuff. This is a picture of me with a new, really fancy instrument that was sitting in the hall for a while before it got installed. That's a mass spectrometer inside of that box. And a lot of the PhD was like dealing with tiny tubes or making cool plots in Python because you generate a lot of data when you're doing this kind of stuff and Excel just won't cut it. So I had never taken any computer science before and I just kind of had to learn on the fly. And I think it worked out okay. I probably am missing some fundamentals still, but I think it was good overall. Okay, next slide, please. So that was during my PhD. I focused a little bit more on the measurement side of things, but now in the lab that I work on, or that I work in now, we make the tools that can take this raw mass spectrometry data, which is just like lines on a graph, and turn it into the pieces of the proteins or the peptides, and then all the way back to the protein level. And we can also learn things about those really important little chemical decorations that get added on to the proteins that can completely change their function or be like a marker of disease or something. So all of that stuff happens computationally, and this is kind of a diagram of like, so the big squiggles at the top are the proteins, and then on the right, all those big letters, that's like a whole protein sequence. And we chop them up to make them easier to separate. Actually, it's kind of confusing, but we chop them up into peptides, and then that's what we actually measure with a mass spectrometer. And we take the, and then we break that peptide up so that we can get the sequence, like the actual identity of the peptide. And then we compare that to a database of the known human protein sequences. Usually we're measuring humans, but we use other organisms too sometimes. And we compare those back to each other and basically can identify, and there's a lot of statistics and signal processing and all this kind of stuff that's involved. But so the lab that I work in now actually makes all these tools to take the raw mass spectrometry data and turn it into something that a biologist or even a doctor can read and you know, figure out what's going on at the molecular level from some tiny little sample. So yeah, this is good, thank you. So one of the applications that or a close collaboration that I currently work on is trying to look at the little chemical decorations that change the function of microtubules, which is made up of these little tubulin protein building blocks. So anyway, in the green, let's see, actually in all three images, it's green. So all those little like lines and stuff, those are microtubules, and they are absolutely critical to cell survival, but in particular, their kind of main functions can be classified as like cell migration. So they literally provide the structure for cells to creep around and move, you know, in relation to each other or even throughout the body. They are involved in intracellular trafficking, meaning they are used as little highways where this protein here that's kind of like in pink, it literally like walks along the microtubule and can drag this big ugly balloon thing, which is called a vacuole. And it can like drag it around from like, you know, someplace where the waste was produced, and the vacuole contains the waste, and then it's like a garbage bag being taken to some other place in the cell where it can be properly disposed of. And then it's also, our microtubules are involved in cell division. So they actually are the things that pull chromosomes apart and allow us to grow and survive. So what I study now is, or what I'm working on now is trying to make these tools that will help us be able to figure out what little chemical modifications change the function of the microtubules and basically how they're important in a lot of diseases. Okay, next slide, please. So outside of work, you can flip through all of these. There's a lot. So outside of these, or outside of, you know, the lab, which is now my like room here in the house, but I like to do a lot of ecological restoration work on the weekends. So I work closely with the City of Ann Arbor Natural Area Preservation, and this is another fun / not so fun fact. I love plants, but some plants are bad and should not be here, and they actually degrade the environment like pretty intensely. So anyways, so I do a lot of invasive non-native plant removal on the weekends because I think it's really important, and plants are the foundation of, you know, life. So I also like to prune street trees for the City of Ann Arbor. So we do that in the winter. It's a good way to get outside. So it's like a weird volunteer thing that I do. And then I also coached I have coached an elementary science Olympiad team, and it was elementary school kids, and we did like bird identification, and it was really fun, and we actually won. So yay. And then like I was talking about earlier, I met Risha through Girls Who Code, which is a super fun organization. And if y'all want to get on our mailing list, let me know. And then the other thing that I recently have gotten more involved in is trying to like support our democracy and trying to get people to register to vote and help voters out. So I'm trying to get involved, or have been getting involved with that kind of stuff too. So I know most of y'all probably aren't 18, but try to make sure that people you know who are 18 and over vote. All right, I think that's everything. Oh, never mind, sorry, I have 2 more slides. Gosh, I'm going too long. So anyway, in my current job, I help develop these tools that make analyzing mass spectrometry data a lot more easy and interpretable. And I think this is a really fun, like the job is a really fun mix of chemistry and physics and engineering, because I have to know how the instruments work, biology, because I have to be able to talk to biologists, and just a lot of collaboration overall and working on a team, which is super fun. Okay, next slide, please. Oh yeah, my career goal is to just keep learning. Okay, so then on my final slide, this is me. It's a super weird picture of me with a snake. And the point of this is, like, I know like people hate snakes, but I like snakes. And my parents encouraged me to get involved with science and this kind of stuff like at a really early age, and they were supportive, and they were, you know, made me feel like I belong and gave me these resources. So I'm somebody who comes from like a lot of privilege. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And if you ever have extra energy to help other people, you should. That's kind of a good thing to think about. But also, like, if you don't have these research opportunities and stuff, it's never too late to get involved, because people will understand, I think increasingly so, that if you come from a different background, like, you might not have those opportunities, or it just might not have happened for you for whatever reason. So I'm super privileged. I'm trying to recognize that. And then the other thing is this, people say, and I think Harshini talked about this a little bit too, this imposter syndrome. It's a big problem for women in science. And I guess, like, people say fake it till you make it, and I kind of wanted to define what that means to me. You'll never feel like you made it. I think that as the older that I get, the more I realize that, like, nobody ever feels like they know what they're doing. And if you have an interesting job and it's a challenge, then you will feel like you're unqualified at all times. And basically, like, so the fake it part is just believe in yourself, but also, and like, it's okay to feel really unqualified. But also definitely don't pretend that you know stuff when you don't know stuff. So always ask questions to make sure that you are getting that content knowledge or whatever it is that you need to be a success, basically. So you belong, and ask lots of questions. That's my career advice. Okay, I am finally done. Thank you all. Happy to answer questions about literally anything.
Thank you very much. As we said before, we will answer all of our questions at the end of the event. Thank you so much, Sarah. Now I'll be introducing our last speaker for the night, Sabrina. Sabrina is a rising senior at the University of Michigan studying physics and math. Her original background is in particle physics, but she has recently made the transition to computer science research. She has done cybersecurity research at the National Renewable Energy Lab and is now working on using machine learning to model COVID-19 spread. Please welcome Sabrina.
Hi, everyone. So without any further ado, I'm sorry that I don't have any visual aids or anything, but hopefully I can bring in lots of helpful information today. And of course, I'm really excited to answer any questions that come up kind of as I talk or that have come up as we've gone through. And so I can kind of give some background about kind of who I am, what I've done, how I've gotten here, and hopefully some helpful advice for all of you going forwards. So to start, my name, as you know, is Sabrina, and I am a senior at Michigan. I study both physics and math, but my primary focus is physics. So my math major is actually a subdivision of math called mathematical sciences, and it has a special focus on physics. So pretty much all of my studies that I've done at Michigan have been completely physics-based. But in terms of my research, which has kind of been the core defining experience of my time here at Michigan, is all of my research has taken me in what feels like a million different directions in just 3 years. I started in the classroom thinking that I was interested in physics. I also was interested in public policy and journalism. I was even interested in maybe chemistry, several different fields. But what made physics interesting to me was that it was kind of a melding of pure science with engineering. It was kind of at the crossroads. And so I decided to give it a try. And when I first came to college, I really had no idea what physics in the classroom would be like. And at first, I was really kind of surprised because when I was taking my first classes, it was a lot of classical mechanics. So for example, the motion of a ball on a ramp or a car making a turn. And I was almost disappointed. I felt like I wanted quantum mechanics, I wanted particle physics, and this didn't seem like the physics that I had kind of imagined that college physics would be like. And so that's what led me to seek out a research group, because before just completely writing off physics, I wanted to see what it was really like outside the classroom and what being a physicist was really like. And so this led me to seek out my first research group, And the way that I did that was just by finding a professor online whose research seemed to align with my interests at Michigan. I wrote to him to ask if I could work for him. Fortunately, he had a spot available, and I joined his lab. Originally, I was hoping to work in dark matter research, so exploring what makes up our universe, but there actually weren't any availabilities in his group for dark matter research. So what I ended up doing was completely different, but still really exciting, which was particle physics research. Now, what I was doing in particle physics then was trying to solve this really big puzzle of what's considered the radius of a proton. Now, what we know about protons is that they don't actually take up a specific amount of space. They can behave as a wave or as kind of a point or a particle in the sense that we might normally think of them. So when you think about the behavior of the proton, you can measure what's called its effective charge radius. And this is how big you might picture it to be when you think about it as a particle in that kind of classical sphere sense. And so in measuring the radius, this radius of the proton, different groups had come up with different measurements using different methods. And what we were curious about is if these different measurements were the result of actual properties coming from the methods used to measure the proton, or if they were just experimental errors. And so what I did for this lab was I got involved in what finally started feeling like real physics, where I got to work on the hardware for the experiment. I got to build little chambers meant to hold liquid hydrogen that particles would get fired at to measure how they scattered off of protons. And I got to start working with electronics in the lab and actually writing code to control them myself from the computer. And so I started getting kind of an idea of how engineering and computer science and physics can all interact in a lab. And that's when physics started coming really alive for me. So with this experience and really enjoying where I was going, I ended up, of course, continuing with physics. And that led to eventually me meeting a professor my sophomore year, where I met with him to discuss some potential opportunities going forward, scholarship-wise, different summer research opportunities. And he happened to mention this one type of program that sends students to CERN for a semester. For those of you who haven't heard of CERN, CERN is the European Center for Nuclear Research, and it's most famous for the Large Hadron Collider, which is essentially a huge ring several miles in diameter underground, where particles are accelerated really rapidly and collided in this ring. And they move so quickly that they can simulate the conditions of the universe very shortly after the Big Bang. And so we can get an idea of their behaviors at the very beginning of the universe. Now, I ended up applying for this program and getting in, and so I went away for a semester to CERN, which is in Switzerland, where I was able to work on new detector technologies for an entire semester for what's called ATLAS, which is one of the big experiments that works on the LHC. So I was working on this new type of detector that detects charged particles and creates an electrical signal that reads out to a series of computers that can then tell you what type of particles we're passing through. And this just reaffirmed my interest in not just particle physics, but engineering in general. And so when I came back from that semester abroad, I decided to continue working for ATLAS, but obviously since I wasn't actually at CERN anymore, I couldn't work hands-on with the detectors. So I ended up working on what was called analysis in general, where analysis in particle physics generally means using computer science and statistics to help analyze the behavior of particles that pass through the detectors. So what I ended up learning from this experience was how to use what's called machine learning for analyzing particle behaviors. And this is where I really started getting into computer science and engineering even more. Machine learning is basically a buzzword that refers to using usually statistical algorithms that are able to bring in really large data sets all at once and typically make predictions for you based off of really small, intricate patterns in the data that humans might not be able to pick up themselves. And so this is where I really started falling in love with statistics and, again, computer science, engineering, and so on. Now, finally, I ended up working again for Atlas, the same collaboration, but again remotely, but this time on writing firmware. And this was kind of the last push that I needed in the direction of engineering. Firmware is what allows hardware devices to work. So I ended up working on programming hardware to read out different signals that pass through the detectors that I was working on. Now, at this point, I had worked on virtually every aspect of the experiment. And what I had learned was that above all, within physics, I loved engineering. And this led me to think, well, if that's what I love, what do I want to be applying it to? And I realized that although I loved particle physics, I really wanted to contribute to making a more tangible difference with my research. And so this led me to thinking about doing renewable energy research, which is what I've ended up transitioning to more recently. So this past summer, I ended up working at the National Renewable Energy Lab, but I worked remotely because obviously everything went virtual this summer. But what I got to work on there was, again, using machine learning to make predictions, but this time in a totally different context. This time I was working on using machine learning to both detect and protect against different types of really common attacks on modern computer networks that kind of govern all of the energy systems within the United States electrical grid. And within this project, I got to build and simulate my own networks. I got to build my own algorithms to detect attacks. And I learned so much about cybersecurity in general, renewable energy, and all sorts of different aspects of working with this type of analysis that really kept pushing me in the renewable energy direction. Now, more recently, I've taken kind of a hiatus from renewable energy, and I've moved into COVID-19 modeling, and that's obviously just because right now it's really important to get really good COVID models and to understand what's happening with the pandemic as it's happening. So what I'm doing now is I'm focusing on using machine learning, again, that's kind of become my primary area of interest, to read in information about COVID-19 cases and mortality and to make future predictions based off of this. And what I'm working on right now with this approach is making this information and our predictions available to the public so that we can know really early, are cases going to start increasing again? Are deaths going to start increasing again? What are we doing right and what could we possibly improve? And so our model, my group's model, every week we submit it to what's called the COVID-19 Forecasting Hub, which is a collection of models like ours, but with all different variations from lots of different universities. And they collect them into a single really strong prediction because all of our models together are stronger than any of our individual models. And what they do is they aggregate this prediction, they get this information out to the CDC, and then the CDC uses it for their national public-facing projections. Now, that's where the status of my research is now, and it kind of points a bit towards the direction I'm heading in the future, but I've kind of taken a bit of a deviation in my path here. Right now, I'm applying for my PhD in applied physics or electrical engineering, depending on the schools I'm applying to. And what I'm hoping to do is transition back to renewable energy, but to take what I've learned about not just physics throughout my classes and my research, but machine learning and firmware and electrical engineering in general, and to hopefully just contribute to improving renewable energy technologies and pushing the field forward. And so along the way, there are several different key takeaways that I've had, and that I would definitely say are things that I would want my younger self to know if I could go back in time and tell myself. The first point that I would want to make, and the biggest point that I would want to make, is that it's really important to take absolutely every opportunity that comes your way, as long as it fits with kind of your general path and as long as it interests you. If you're not sure that you want to do something, but you get a really incredible opportunity, or you don't know whether or not you're qualified for something, but it seems really interesting, and so you're wondering whether or not you should apply, you should shoot for anything that interests you and do your best to make it happen, because you have no idea where a single opportunity could end up pushing you. If I hadn't talked to that single professor my sophomore year, I never would have ended up at CERN. I never would have learned about machine learning, at least at the pace that I did. And I never would have ended up where I am now. And even with the National Renewable Energy Lab, I wasn't sure whether or not I would be qualified to take on that position because I had only worked in physics before. But it's all about making a sell for yourself and being confident in your abilities and trying to get different opportunities and really advocate for yourself. But that also ties into another concept, which is that not every opportunity is going to come easily and not every opportunity is going to work out. Although I was really lucky to get the internship at the National Renewable Energy Lab, I applied for a lot of internships for this past summer that didn't pan out. And they were for all sorts of different companies, all sorts of different agencies that interested me. And a few of them got pushed forward a bit, but then fell through. And eventually I ended up finding what was the perfect opportunity for me, which was the National Renewable Energy Lab. So it's really important to not get discouraged when a single opportunity doesn't work out, because you have no idea where you could end up going with future opportunities. And in addition, something really important that I've learned is that it's super important to engage with and make connections with others in your field, because imposter syndrome is a very real thing. You might occasionally feel like you're not living up to your own expectations, or like you could be doing more, or feeling like you don't necessarily fit in with what you're doing. And I'd say that one of the best ways to alleviate that is to get involved with groups that do outreach, to reach out to your coworkers and really get to know them as friends and even kind of a pseudo family if you can. That's what's happened for me in my research, and it's what's made it not just a really wonderful experience professionally, but also personally. So along the lines of making those connections, I have gotten involved in Women in Mathematics at Michigan. Women in Mathematics is a group for students that identify as female or non-binary, and for anyone with an interest in math, regardless of their major. And what we do is we try to foster a positive community so that everyone can kind of find a support network and engage in professional and social events that help them feel really ingrained in the community and like they belong there. Similarly, I've also gotten involved in teaching efforts through Wolverine Pathways, Math Circle, and even Math Corps, which are 3 U of M efforts within the math department that help educate younger students in the surrounding areas. And through those experiences, I've gotten to engage with others and really see the value of everyone involved in the STEM community, everyone just doing their best and engaging and helping each other and learning. And I'd say it's all of those combinations together, not just working on your own, not just doing your own research, but collaborating, helping, and getting to know others that really makes it all worthwhile. So I can drop my email address in the chat here for anyone interested in reaching out with further questions. But for now, I'd be happy to get into the Q&A with everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you to all of our speakers for the night. And now, please put your questions in the Q&A and we will get to answering all of them.
Awesome. So I would just like to thank all of you guys again so much. Your presentations were all so engaging and you had so much great information shared. Since we're kind of on a crunch for time, I'm going to read out every question, and if you could just briefly answer them so we can get through all of the questions, that would be great. So the first question is directly to Harshini. What are some tips that you have for getting mentors?
Yeah, so I would just like reach out to people. I went to a lot of talks, and like we have a lot of guest speakers at places, so just being able to like reach out. Usually they provide contact information, so that'd be like the best way I think to reach out and just find mentors.
Yeah, I like how Sabrina mentioned reaching out to professors. That's also another great way to get mentors. To Sarah, you mentioned that you taught several courses, including Orgo. What are some tips you might give incoming college students as a teacher?
I think So teaching organic is a weird one because people are pre-med and there's just like a little bit of a culture where it's like if anybody gets any like half of a point wrong, it's the end of the world. So just it's okay if you work hard, you can do it. Yeah, I mean, different schools have different kind of levels of like how hard orgo is, and other like weed out classes. But my advice is be really nice to your GSI too, because they are the person who, if you go to a really big school, that's the person that you're going to have more contact with. So that was like as a graduate student, I was a GSI, and then the professor is the professor of the class. So that's the person who you can actually, if you build a relationship with your GSI, they're going to be more like able to give you better help, I would say.
Awesome. So the next couple questions are more broad questions, so any of the panelists can answer. A couple of you mentioned that you came into college thinking that you'd major in a different field than you ended up doing. So what advice do you have for people who are unsure of what they want to do, or like multiple fields that they can't choose?
So I would just say for me, it was like getting exposed to a lot of different things. Like, don't be scared to sign up for a class that maybe you don't think you'd like, not that you don't like, but like you've never had experience in, because that's why they're like intro-level courses. It just kind of exposes you to like different fields and what you can major in.
All right, so you mentioned taking multiple AP classes in high school. Wait, where'd the question go? Do you think this helped you in college and in general?
Was I the one that mentioned that? I think so. I think it did help, I guess, just because like when I was in some of these classes, like I'd kind of seen the content before, so that was helpful. But if you don't have AP classes, that's okay too. I mean, you should challenge yourself, but like don't be unreasonable. Like don't take an insane course load in high school, because high school's fun and you should have fun also.
All right, so this is more of a broad question, but what is some advice that you would give to your high school or college freshman self?
Some advice that I would give to my college freshman self in particular would be that everything is going to be okay. First, coming to college, I had this sense that every single assignment, every single exam was very life and death, and that everything had to be taken very, very seriously. And while it's true that obviously you want to take all of your studies in general very seriously, you're in college once you get there. I was in college. It's okay to make mistakes, and that's the whole point of being in college, is making mistakes and learning from them. So really the core of what I would tell myself is not to worry about every individual mistake and not to worry about occasionally slipping up, because the whole purpose of taking really challenging classes and pushing yourself is so that you're able to learn and just keep growing. So it's okay if not everything you do is perfect. It'll work out.
Yeah, so on the topic of making mistakes, how easy or hard is it to change what you research, and how is that different from changing your major?
Maybe I'll take that one. So it is quite a bit different because, well, let's see. People do it. Like all things, people can change their majors on a dime if they really need to, and just, you know, as long as you like look at the credits that you need and the courses that you need and get it all worked out, you're going to probably need a couple spreadsheets to do that, but you can do that sort of thing. Just maybe don't wait until like your senior year to change your major, probably. But in terms of changing research areas, people definitely do it, and oftentimes, like if you change your research area, you can actually bring a lot to your new research area because you have some, you know, cross-discipline knowledge. So it definitely can be done. Usually people don't switch from like doing molecular biology to particle physics, for example, but kind of things, there are some things that can bridge those gaps.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So regarding COVID-19 research, where do you get your data, and is it from the CDC or do you get it from other sources?
Great question. We get our data from the Johns Hopkins University repository. They have what's called a Git repository, which is an online service where they can upload all of their data and us researchers can pull it really quickly. We chose Johns Hopkins because they're what's called the ground truth for the hub that we contribute to, meaning that all of the groups are expected to use that data, since that way all of our models will agree in terms of their baseline, not necessarily our predictions. And we're actually running some studies now, though, making comparisons between Johns Hopkins and, say, the New York Times data sets and the COVID tracker data sets, because they all have different variations in their data, different ways of updating past data, and so on. And so while our main focus is Johns Hopkins, we're doing some studies right now with those 3 data sets, New York Times and COVID tracker as well.
All right, so I think this might be our last question, but how have you been productive during quarantine?
So for me, during the summer, since I was kind of forced to work, I went into my job, so it kind of helped a lot with just making sure I was getting my stuff done. And since I've come to school, since everything is virtual, me and my roommates make it a point to go outside of our apartment to do work, because it's really important to have the workspace and your relaxing space, just because it's really hard, because usually you leave for class. So we make it a point to try to leave at least once a day and do our work somewhere else, whether it be Starbucks or outside, just to be more productive.
Okay, if anyone else has any questions, they can type them in the chat. If not, I think that will be all for today. I just really want to thank all of our guest speakers again so much for all of your information, and really a big thank you to all the students as well for attending the seminar today and asking so many really great thought-provoking questions. Throughout the year, INTEGIRLS Detroit hosts a variety of different contests and informational seminars. Some of our upcoming events include 2 more informational seminars just like this one on October 4th and October 20th, as well as a fall math competition for middle school and high school female and non-binary students. So please check out our website for more information. We will send the link to the website in the chat. And of course, sign up for our mailing list to get more regular updates for more events like this. And we hope to see a lot of you in our future events. So just before we finish closing everything, we just wanted to take a quick picture to just remember the event. So if you all could smile. Okay, awesome. That is great.
Thank you everyone for speaking tonight. We really do appreciate it. This was our first event as INTEGIRLS, and we were really happy you guys all came out today. So thank you very much.
Again, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself at the beginning, but I'm Anwisha. I'm one of the co-directors, and I've been trying to fix the technical issues. Of course, we had some errors as it was our first event, but I will be making sure that we could fix those by next time. So thank you everyone for attending today.
Thank you for bearing with us. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.